console has its dark secrets it wants you to forget. From a bad DBZ game to god-awful movie tie-in games, this is the worst game from each console. Starting with the PlayStation, released in 1994. Starting off strong, or rather, super weak, we've got Dragon Ball Z, Ultimate Battle 22 on the PS1, rocking a brutal 25 on Metacritic and a 4.9 user score. This game was originally released in Japan in 1995, and for some reason, we didn't get it in the West until 2003. Yeah. 2003, after Budokai already happened. And when we finally did, we got stiff 2D sprites, input lag worse than a dial-up connection, and AI that goes from brain dead to unbeatable with no in-between. It looks like it was animated on a graphing calculator, and plays just as slow. Even hardcore DBZ fans were like, you know what? I'm good. Ultimate Battle 22. More like Ultimate Budget Beta version 0.22. Now technically, the absolute worst N64 game might be Carmageddon 64, a port so broken and hideous, it doesn't even have a Metacritic rating. Like, Metacritic saw it and just said no thanks. But in terms of actual reviewed games, that crown goes to Rally Challenge 2000, sitting at a Metascore of 41 and a user score of 5.9. And man, is it a snooze fest. The driving feels like you're piloting a brick through molasses, the AI drives like it's stuck in Sunday traffic, and the tracks are so dull they could double as ASMR. It's not hilariously bad or broken, just painfully average, which almost makes it worse. On a console filled with racing bangers like Wave Race, F-Zero X, and Diddy Kong Racing, this one's like showing up to a street race in a beige minivan. Next up is ECW Anarchy Rulz on the Dreamcast, dropping in with a Metascore of 38, but somehow rocking a user score of 7.7. Yeah, I don't know what match they were watching either. Let's be real, this game tries to capture the chaos of ECW, but ends up delivering something closer to backyard wrestling with a busted Game Shark. Animations are janky, hit detection is inconsistent, and the controls feel like you're inputting moves through a fax machine. There are like 30 match types, but half of them are just gimmick reskins of the same clunky formula. It's got that old-school wrestling charm, sure, but that doesn't make it good. If you loved it as a kid, I respect the nostalgia. But let's not pretend this wasn't a steel chair to the face of Dreamcast's reputation. Technically, the lowest-rated PS2 game on Metacritic is Gravity Games' Bike, Street. Vert Dirt. With a 24 Metascore and a 2.0 user score, but it's so obscure and weirdly divisive, it's like the Velveeta of video games. Some people somehow love it. So instead, let's talk about a game we can all agree is a total disaster, Godai, Elemental Force, with a Metascore of 27 and a user score of 4.5. This game tried to blend martial arts, platforming, and magic into one epic adventure, and face-planted on every front. Combat is sluggish, the camera has a mind of its own, and the story feels like it was translated by Google circa 2001. You play as Hero, chosen warrior, who moves like he's fighting underwater and sounds like he's reading his lines off a cue card. It's not just bad, it's embarrassingly bad. Godai promised elemental power, and delivered elemental regret. Now technically, the worst-rated GBA game is Legends of Wrestling 2, sitting at a Metascore of 24, but that's just a bad port of a bad console game, and honestly, the GBA was never meant to handle 3D wrestling. So instead, let's talk about something that was actually made for the system, Mucha Lucha. Masqueridas of the Lost Code, a GBA exclusive with a Metascore of 26 and a user score of 3.7. This game is based on the early 2000s cartoon about Luchador kids, and while the show had some chaotic charm, this game has none of it. It's a platformer fighter hybrid where the controls are stiff, the levels are repetitive, and the hitboxes are all over the place. Enemies just stand around until you maybe land a hit, and the combat feels like button mashing with oven mitts. Even fans of the show were like, nope, I'm out. This wasn't just a bad game, it was a $5 bargain bin trap with a cool box and zero soul. Next up, we've got Charlie's Angels for the GameCube, rocking a Metascore of 23 and a user score of 3.3, and honestly, I'm surprised those numbers are that high. This game is a masterclass in how not to adapt a movie franchise. It's a 3D beat 'em up where the combat feels like you're swinging pool noodles underwater, the animations are robotic, and the environments are so empty, they look procedurally generated by a PS1 in turn. You play as the angels, though you'd be forgiven for thinking they're malfunctioning mannequins. No voice acting, broken AI, hilariously awkward walking cycles, and one of the worst camera systems in 6th-gen history. It's like the devs watched Charlie's Angels once, wrote the game on a napkin, and then fell asleep halfway through coding it. Even fans of the movie were like, yeah, nah, we're good. I gotta give an honorable mention to Pulse Racer, a broken racing game with a Metascore of 24 and a user score of 2.0, but when it comes to the worst Xbox game ever, there's no contest. Drake of the 99 Dragon sits at a Metascore of 22 and a matching 2.0 user score, and it earned every bit of it. This game is pure chaos. You play as Drake, a tattooed assassin who's apparently dead, undead, and boring all at once. The story makes zero sense, the voice acting sounds like it was recorded in a tin can, and the dual-wield shooting mechanics, completely broken. The auto-aim has no idea what it's doing, the camera fights you at every turn, and movement feels like you're slipping on banana peels. It wanted to be The Matrix meets Max Payne, but ended up as PowerPoint meets migraine. It's the kind of game that makes you question your life choices, and then crashes before you can answer. Let's make a deal, and by that, I mean let's never play this game again. Deal or No Deal on the DS scored a Metascore of 20 and a user score of 3.6, and honestly, that's generous. It takes one of the most high-stakes, suspense-filled game shows ever, and turns it into the most boring touchscreen experience imaginable. The graphics are bargain bin, the animations are barely there, and the models look like PS1 rejects. You pick a briefcase, stare at some menus, and listen to a robotic banker offer deals so repetitive it feels like punishment. It's all luck, zero strategy, and the fun runs out faster than your patience. Somehow, this got multiple ports, but the DS version might be the only game where winning still feels like losing. You knew this one was coming. Dragon Ball, Evolution for the PSP, based on the live-action movie that scarred a generation. It holds a Metascore of 28 and a user score of 1.4, and honestly, I think that's too high. This game looks like a rushed Budokai mod but somehow plays worse. The fighting is stiff, the animations are recycled, and the visuals. Goku looks like he's cosplaying as himself at Spirit Halloween. Combos are shallow, AI is brain dead, and the story mode is just a painful recap of a movie we've all tried to forget. Even die-hard Dragon Ball fans were like, nope. Not canon. Burn it. This isn't just the worst Dragon Ball game, it's one of the worst licensed games of all time. If you ever wanted to Kamehameha your dignity into a black hole, here's your chance. So technically the worst game for the Xbox 360 is a tie between Yaris, Toyota's attempt at advertising their new Yaris, and Double Dragon 2, Wander of the Dragons. Both an abysmal Metascore of 17 out of 100, but I'm looking at a more infamous game. Ride to Hell, Retribution is what happens when your 70-year-old, Harley-Davidson grandpa tries to be cool. Released in June 25, 2013 for the Xbox 360, this was originally meant to be an open-world motorbiking game with a lot of action. In this game, you play as Jake, a badass motherfucker whose brother is killed by a rival gang. Torn by this, Jake sets out on a revenge plot to kill the gang who killed his brother. This all sounds like a badass plot, until you see the gameplay. Suddenly, you can see why it only has a Metascore of 19 out of 100. The 1% on the box is starting to make a lot more sense. Technically, the worst-rated PS3 game is Leisure Suit Larry, box office bust, but let's be real, that was a niche title nobody bought and everyone forgot. This though? Rambo, the video game? This was a full-blown licensed disaster with a Metascore of 23, and it's burned into gamer memory for all the wrong reasons. It's a rail shooter, released in 2014. On the PS3. You don't move your character, you just click and shoot while the game awkwardly drags Rambo through set pieces from the movies like a wax dummy on rails. The voice acting is just recycled audio clips from the films, the enemies are dumb as bricks, and the graphics look like they belong on a budget PS2 war game. It's like watching a bad 80s action parody without the jokes. This isn't a game, it's a war crime with QTEs. Alright, technically the lowest rated Wii game is a forgotten WiiWare title called Spogs Racing, with a metascore of 18 and, somehow, a user score of 6.1. I guess there's a cult of Spogs fans out there. But let's go with something a bit more infamous, Cruis'n for the Wii. It got slapped with a metascore of 25 and a user score of 4.6, and critics absolutely dunked on it for bad visuals, clunky handling, and lifeless AI. But I'll be honest. I actually enjoyed this one. It's got that classic Midway arcade energy, wild speeds, cheesy music, physics that make zero sense, and cars that explode for no reason. Sure, it's janky. Sure, it looks like a PS2 launch game. But it's also dumb fun. Is it technically bad? Absolutely. But did I have a blast playing it? Cruis'n, baby. You know a game's in trouble when both critics and fans agree it's a train wreck. Tenkai Knights, Brave Battle has a metascore of 26 and a user score of 2.6, and it absolutely deserves it. This is one of the most uninspired, repetitive, and downright lazy brawlers on the system. Based on a short-lived cartoon, the game tries to blend mech-style combat with a side-scrolling arena format, but what you actually get is the same copy-pasted level, over and over again. Bad hit detection, no depth, awkward controls, and music that loops like a broken ringtone. It feels like the devs just slapped the Tenkai Knights logo on a half-finished engine and called it a day. The irony? The game's all about shape-shifting robot heroes, yet somehow, this thing never transforms into anything fun. When Call of Duty, Black Ops Declassified dropped on the PS Vita, fans were hyped. This was supposed to be the real deal, portable Call of Duty with online multiplayer, campaign missions, the works. What we got? A metascore of 33, a user score of 5.0, and a game that felt more like a tech demo than a blockbuster. The campaign? A mess of short, forgettable missions that last less than 2 minutes each. The AI? Brain dead. The controls? Stiff. The multiplayer? Buggy, unbalanced, and filled with connection issues. And yet, some people still had fun. Maybe it was the novelty of playing COD on a handheld, maybe it was nostalgia, or maybe we were all just really desperate for something good on the Vita. But no matter how you slice it, Declassified was a massive missed opportunity. A game with the Call of Duty name, that fired completely blank. Yes, technically the Wii U's lowest rated games are bargain bin party titles like Family Party, 30 Great Games Obstacle Arcade, Metascore, 11, Game Party Champions, and ESPN Sports Connection. But those were clearly shovelware. The one game people actually remember, for all the wrong reasons, is Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric. With a metascore of 32 and a user score of 3.6, this was a franchise low point that even hardcore Sonic fans couldn't defend. This game is the definition of a broken promise, awkward character redesigns, unfinished levels, janky animations, and so many glitches it looked like an alpha build. There were moments where characters literally fell through the world. Combat was dull, exploration was aimless, and the story felt like a Saturday morning cartoon, but with none of the charm. And let's not forget Knuckles' infamous infinite jump glitch, which let players literally bypass half the game. Sonic Boom was meant to reintroduce Sonic to a new generation. Instead, it ran headfirst into a wall, and the franchise is still recovering from the whiplash. Afro Samurai 2 technically takes the crown as the worst-rated PS4 game, with a metascore of 21, but that game was so bad it got pulled from digital storefronts entirely. So let's talk about a game that's not just bad, it's infamous, Road Rage. With a Metascore of 26 and a user score of 2.3, this game is what happens when you mix janky physics, PS2 era graphics, and repetitive gameplay, then crash it all into a wall. Marketed as a spiritual successor to the cult classic Road Rash, it had promise, motorcycles, melee combat, open-world chaos. What we got was an empty city, broken mechanics, and combat that felt like flailing pool noodles on wheels. Bikes handled like shopping carts, the missions were copy-pasted nonsense, and the bugs, oh, the bugs, made it borderline unplayable. It wasn't just bad, it was aggressively bad. Road Rage became a benchmark for failure, proof that even the simplest ideas can go horribly wrong in the wrong hands. It's not just a bad game, it's a crash course in how not to make one. Here's a tip for game developers: if your game relies on motion controls, maybe make sure they work first. Fighter Within dropped as a launch title for the Xbox One, meant to be the Kinect 2.0's big moment. Instead, it became a disaster of flailing limbs, laggy inputs, and pure frustration. With a Metascore of 23 and a user score of 2.8, this brawler didn't just flop, it face-planted into the mat. Your character would throw a punch, 5 seconds after you did. Kick detection was a coin toss. Blocking? Hope you like getting hit anyway. The voice acting was laughable, the story was cringy, and the fights? Let's just say watching two inflatable tube men duke it out would have been more satisfying. Fighter Within was supposed to be the future of motion-controlled combat. What we got was a tutorial on why Kinect died. This wasn't a fighting game, it was a fitness simulator for your patience. Vroom in the night sky is what happens when you take a broken tech demo, slap in a magical girl aesthetic, and then forget to actually make it fun. You ride a flying scooter through the night sky collecting stardust while mumbling, "What am I doing with my life?" every 30 seconds. The controls? Floaty and unresponsive. The visuals? PS2 tier at best. The story? Something about magical girls and cosmic keys, but it's so poorly translated, it's basically magical gibberish. It was one of the Switch's earliest digital-only titles, and unfortunately, it helped reinforce the idea that the eShop could quickly become a dumping ground. With a Metascore of 17, this is one of the worst reviewed games on the entire system. Playing it feels like driving through a dream you want to wake up from. And when the best thing people can say about your game is that it ends eventually, yeah, it's time to park the scooter and uninstall. CrossfireX was supposed to be a big deal. A legendary free-to-play FPS from Asia making its bold entrance onto Xbox with a full single-player campaign co-developed by Remedy, no less. But instead of a blockbuster, we got a broken, confusing mess that felt like it was released 3 months too early, and 3 years too late. The controls are stiff, the AI is dumb as bricks, and the multiplayer feels like a bootleg Counter-Strike running on a potato. The campaign had a cool idea behind it, but the storytelling was shallow and the mechanics were clunky as hell. It launched with game-breaking bugs, terrible hit detection, and servers that might as well have been held together with duct tape. Even die-hard shooter fans bailed within days. With a Metascore of 38 and a user score of 3.2, CrossfireX is less of a firefight and more of a dumpster fire. And in the end, it got shut down entirely just over a year later. A rough reminder that even the biggest promises mean nothing without execution. You know a game is in trouble when it drops with a Metascore of 33 and a user score of 1.4, and it's not even a broken early access title. The Lord of the Rings, Gollum was supposed to give us a fresh perspective on Middle-earth through one of its most iconic, and tragic, characters. Instead, it gave us ugly visuals, janky stealth, and a storyline that somehow made one of Tolkien's most layered characters feel boring. Animations were lifeless, the environments looked like PS3 leftovers, and the gameplay loop was so shallow you could fall asleep mid-sneak. But the worst part? They released an apology on launch day. Yep, the devs pre-wrote a sorry letter, basically admitting the game was a disaster before the reviews even hit. It's not just a bad Lord of the Rings game, it's one of the worst modern licensed games, period. Gollum deserved better. We all did. The Switch 2 is still fresh on the market, but that hasn't stopped a few duds from sneaking in already. Tamagotchi Plaza sits at a Metascore of 42, with a user score of 6.0, suggesting a bit of a divide between critics and nostalgic fans. So, what went wrong? Well, almost everything is just fine, but nothing is fun. It's essentially a glorified minigame collection wrapped in a painfully basic interface, offering just enough interactivity to remind you this isn't a mobile app, even though it plays like one. You tap through shallow activities, decorate rooms, and occasionally play minigames that feel like rejected WiiWare prototypes. It's not broken, just boring. Fans of the Tamagotchi brand might get a few cozy vibes out of it, but for everyone else, it's the digital equivalent of watching paint dry. A disappointing way to cap off a brand that was once all about quirky charm and addictive chaos. So there you have it. The worst of the worst. Do you agree with this list? Let me know down in the comments, and remember, stay alpha.